then, let's get into this video from Saint Contest. Great content creator Electro got screwed over. Yes, it did. And my boy Calchero got screwed over as well.
Not all Sonata sets were made equal. Some fit
True.
seamlessly with all the characters of their attribute. Some have incredibly simple activation conditions for—
Dude, I've started to really enjoy playing Changli more and more now. When she first came out, I thought she was cool. But the more I use her, she's so satisfying to use.
their full potential. Others, well, others are just clunkier, less rewarding, and much harder to manage compared.
Again, speaking of satisfying, I find Calchero really satisfying to use. And I think he's incredibly rewarding as well, just on the terms of that it is satisfying, impactful, it feels heavy, but his kit really doesn't synergize with the way this game works. And it's a shame. And hopefully, later in the line, the dude is going to get some love. He's going to get some, I don't know how they're going to work it, but maybe he gets a rework. I know Zhangli Yao is kind of the rework, Calchero 2.0, but I'm hoping your boy does get some respect he deserves and get some love from Kuro.
Compared to their peers. There's a reason why some players avoid or will avoid using Void Thunder completely, instead opting for a more generalized offensive set like Lingering Tunes. You might think that sounds odd. Wouldn't the attribute damage set be the best in slot Sonata for characters with that attribute? That's how it is for virtually every main DPS in the game.
True.
That's because—
To be fair, I do use the Void Thunder with Calchero. I'm interested to see what his viewpoint is here.
Void Thunder is simply the worst Sonata set in the game. When factoring in its convoluted activation conditions and absolutely horrifying 4-cost echo skills, Void Thunder just doesn't feel good to use, especially in comparison to other sets. When we also factor in how it's easily one of the hardest sets—
I'd say as well though, the 4-cost echoes are just a little bit— they're just less safe, and they've got a quite long on-field time, haven't they, as well, which just opens you up a little bit more as well, and kind of, I suppose it slows down your character's rotation as well, because you're not just getting straight back into your character. You're on field with them a little bit. I know, obviously, you can do your switches out to your other characters and stuff, but yeah, I agree with that.
to farm in the game, you have a recipe for frustration that plagues a sizable piece of the roster. Today we'll be breaking down why this is the case, diving into the huge difference between Void Thunder and other Sonata sets, the massive disadvantages you face just from using it, and how simply building and farming for this set is a greater challenge than others. As always, if you're enjoying—
Building and farming is definitely an issue. Hopefully, in upcoming patches, we do start to see a lot more Void Thunder echoes. Specifically, we do need some new 4-cost echoes as well. So hopefully, I don't think we're going to really see much in the next patches, but maybe in 2.0, maybe in a new nation, we're going to start to see a lot more of that coming in. Because I think the game definitely does need it for a little bit more of a balance, and maybe some characters as well that work with the set a little bit better also.
Enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Sonata sets are one of the most important pieces of gear for every single character, with their 5-piece bonuses granting some of the largest damage or supportive boosts in the game. To gain the full bonuses of a Sonata set, there's a unique activation condition that must be met by the wielder. For some characters, it's as simple as activating an intro skill. When main DPS characters don't want to take the field for their most damaging rotations until they've activated the outro skills of supportive characters, this is one of the most seamless ways to activate the 5-piece bonuses in the game. If you aren't using an intro skill to begin your main DPS's rotation, you're simply playing them sub-optimally. And the
True. Like, even taking out the Sonata effect there anyway, like, you know, that is a factor.
Sonata sets only further reinforce optimal play and rotations. Other sets have some more unique activation conditions, but are still super easy to use. Molten Rift, for example, simply grants its entire bonus after a single cast of a resonance skill. This has perfect synergy with its wielders because characters like Chisha, Encore, and Chong Li either have multiple charges of their resonance skill, very short cooldowns on the ability, or a built-in refresh through their kits. They also tend to gain a huge damage bonus for using their resonance skills, so they always want to activate these at the start of their rotations. When you compare—
Yeah, again, I have, like, when she first came out, again, she was fun, but, man, the more I use Changli, she just is a really fun character to use. And her audio, you know, they like the impact audio, like the explosive noise it makes. It sounds so freaking good as well.
Sets like these to Void Thunder, it's abundantly
Gets
clear
my
why
monkey
the
brain
Electro
going.
set is objectively worse compared to the other attributes. To gain Void Thunder's full damage bonus, you have to build up 2 stacks from casting a Resonance skill or a heavy attack. This
Yeah, it is a
seems
big thing.
simple at first glance. Just cast 2 Resonance skills.
It's not that it's not even simple after first glance. It's just that it's a time thing. It's a time sink. Well, I say a sink. It's not like you're spending friggin' hours on something, but just the time difference is kind of insane. And it just kind of slows down the whole rotation and the whole max DPS. And then, again, added in with Calcharo and the way his kit works now, and you're always really, especially on more difficult content, losing your max DPS anyway. It just holds him back massively. It obviously holds the whole Sonata effect back and Void Thunder in general, but it just really, really, really nerfs your boy.
And you'll have the full bonus.
Even though he's
This
still
is not the
still
case.
crazy good
The
though. I
set
do like
either
him.
has a translation or a clarity issue. This set actually has 2 separate stacks, one triggered from the Resonance skill and the other triggered from a heavy attack.
Yep.
You cannot gain the set's full bonuses from 2 consecutive Resonance skill casts or 2 consecutive heavy attacks. The set's 5-piece should instead say something like, after releasing a heavy attack and Resonance skill, and further clarify that both of these attacks have to be used for the full 30% bonus. When the Electro characters are, for all intents and purposes, heavily disincentivized from actually using their heavy attacks in their rotations, aside from Calcharo who gains buffs and automatically casts them, this set's activation conditions don't seem to fit a large majority of its potential users. Characters like Shangli Yao and
It really is. Like, I think it's a hangover from the closed beta, isn't he? With because I've heard that Calcharo was actually quite a significant part of the story. And the fact that the dude's got like an animation intro on his intro skill, which is crazy that no other characters got that. It seems like it was heavily designed specifically for Calcharo at the start, and then they kind of moved away from that with the rest of the game, but it's still kind of a lingering factor from the old Wuthering Waves, if that makes sense?
Yinlin don't have particularly amazing synergies with their unbuffed heavy attacks, but they
True.
had to be used to activate the full set's bonuses for the big burst damage on their Resonance liberations. And when you compare it to a set like Molten Rift that simply gives you all of its bonuses after a single Resonance skill cast, it's undeniable that Void Thunder is simply strictly worse in
There you go.
virtually every single way. Unfortunately, the problems with Void Thunder don't end here. To complete a 5-piece Sonata set,
This is what I was saying before. I feel like Calcharo has to get a rework later on in the game. And I think Void Thunder altogether is going to get some kind of tweak potentially. Because I think it just limits, especially the way you get your bonus. I think it kind of limits the design for Electro characters going forward unless they're specifically designed to work with other sets. Because if you do want them to work with that set and they are going to get a decent amount of damage off their actual Void Thunder effect, like it's like, are you really going to want to use them with that? And then they're going to be desirable characters anyway, because they're going to be losing something and they're going to have to be designed in a specific way that's going to make them a little bit less variable in the designs and the kit designs going forward. Like, I think it's going to be something that's probably going to have to be tweaked at some point, right?
you need a matching forecast, and it's safe to say that the Void Thunder forecasts are, again, some of the worst in the game. The Thundering
look cool,
Memphis,
though.
the
They look
premier
cool, though.
Electro and Resonance Liberation buffing skill, has bonuses that characters like Shangli Yao and Calcharo should fall in love with. However, the absurd cast time, huge vulnerability, and disappointing
A lot of
damage
on-field
across
time with
all
them,
of its
isn't it?
attacks makes it one of the most inefficient echoes to fit into your rotation. It could have been
Inefficient and
passable
unsafe.
if it granted its full damage bonus simply from transforming, like the echo skills of the Morning Ikes or Crownless. But you have to go through the entire 6-attack chain to activate its bonus.
Again, talking about a time sink, it makes the whole rotation for your character, especially if you're using Calcharo, just way longer than it needs to be. Your abilities anyway with the way your kit works. The fact that you're losing stuff when you dodge, or your poor interruption defense as well from the potential DPS. Then add in the actual Sonata effect as well, and then your forecast echo. It's just dragging him down constantly, isn't it? And it's such a weird thing to keep there. Like, it's again, because we haven't had a Calcharo banner, and I don't think it's gonna happen, because why would you at this point? It's not gonna be a desirable banner at all. Everybody really knows about the negatives of Calcharo now. Why not just buff him? Why not just make it a thing that at one of the major patches that we get in the future, just buff Calcharo, make it happen, or potentially make it happen in between a banner, you know? When we haven't got a banner, so it doesn't necessarily interfere with the banner, so people are like, oh, I don't need to pull for this because Calcharo's just got a massive buff. But I think it needs to happen. It really does.
Bonus. In prior patches, the Phantom version of this Echo had actually granted the bonus on the first hit, but unfortunately this bug was removed. I don't think anybody would have complained though if it was put back in as a feature. What this means is that most, if not all players running this set instead opt for the Tempest Mephis, equipped with its much faster cast time. This Echo skill is far easier to use and fit into rotations, but it also comes with its own set of downsides. First, this Tempest Mephis skill does a pathetic amount of damage. Just look at the sum of these motion values.
It's not great.
It's a total of around 270 HP.
This is the one I use on Yinlin. I do use the other one on Calcharo, but I don't really use Calcharo that much at all anymore. Calcharo, for me, it's not when I'm trying to do any sort of efficient combat or the higher level combat. I just use him for the fun factor, because I do still think he's really fun to use. That's why I wish he would be more optimized, because he's so fun to use.
% attack. The second and third hits of the Infernal Rider Echo do more damage than the entire Tempest Mephis' attack.
It's crazy.
The Gorilla, another 2-hit Echo skill, completely out-damages the entire Tempest Mephis' attack just with its second hit. The Tempest Mephis does have a short.
To be fair, that's why even when I use Yinlin, I just don't really use it at all. I just go through my cycle, I get my enhanced heavy, and then I move on to get my off-field damage bonus. That's pretty much it, really. Which I guess it does make her less useful as well, in a way. It affects her a lot less than it does somebody like Calcharo. But yeah, it definitely does. Like this, I think this is something that definitely needs to be looked at by Kuro, doesn't it? Because it's like we don't want it to become a part of the game that's just like, okay, you just don't care about that, you know. There's always going to be certain things that are going to be a little bit better than others, and there's going to be metas, and there's always going to be that one thing that, well, if you use this and you use this in this particular way, it's just evidentially better than this other way, if you want to min-max anyway. But if you can get things as close and as balanced as possible, for most people, it just really doesn't matter, unless you're really trying to go for those fine margins. But the gap is quite big, isn't it, really? And it's a little bit worrying that it doesn't seem to be a major focus from Kuro, or at least they're not vocalizing that. Maybe behind the scenes, this is something they're working on, but they haven't really mentioned this or spoke about it, at least that I'm not aware of anyway, or I'm aware of, should I say.
Sure, by about a half a second or slightly more, but does that warrant it having 40 to 70% less damage than the other Echo skills? This just makes it feel far more painful to use compared to the forecasts of the other Sonata sets. And in reality, considering the awful weaknesses of the Thundering Mephis, there's really not many other options for players to use.
The thing is, though, they do have the cool factor. They both look freaking awesome as well, though, man.
If the worst in class motion values weren't enough, the Tempest Mephis also provides some of the worst buffs in the game relative to its users, with a boost to Electro damage and heavy attack damage.
This is exactly why I says I'm not really too fussed about using it in Yinlin's rotation. Of course, you're losing out something if you don't, but it's like, it's not that major that it's like, I can do without it. I really don't necessarily need it.
Like we've discussed before, hardly any of the Electro Resonators want to actively use their heavy attacks. Even Calcharo, who automatically uses heavy attacks in his burst mode, has those heavy attacks converted into Resonance Liberation damage. What this means is that half of this Echo skill buff doesn't exist for the characters it's used on. Combine that with its dog water damage and lack of other options, and you have a Sonata set that feels bad to use from its activation conditions, and bad to use on the...
So again, it's like, I feel like it's a hang-up from the older design of the game, potentially. Anybody who played the closed beta test, you'll have to let me know. Was this set way better? We all know that Calcharo was better, but did the set just work better then? I'll be interested to know, because it feels like it's, again, it was designed for a different game almost, and that's not the game that we have anymore, but that's still a remnant of that old design that hasn't come across yet or hasn't been dragged across, and it's a weird choice.
The Echo skill side, we need more Electro forecasts.
We do.
Or that bug for the Thundering Mephis, just added back into the game. Please, Kuro. We've only been talking about the problems with Void Thunder in combat, but it also has struggles out of it. At the launch of the game, Void Thunder was mathematically the hardest set to farm in the game, with only 2 3 costs dropping the set. With version 1.1 adding a third mob, the Lumascale construct, it should have been a bit easier to complete. However, with only 7 daily spawns on the construct, it's still difficult to build this set just from overworld grinding. There's a reason why—
It's almost like they just don't want you to build Void Thunder because they know it's just a waste of your time. So I'm like, yeah, just we ain't gonna even make you think it's a potential thing for you. Just don't bother.
many players ended up spending their malleable echoes on herons or flautists. Hopefully, we can see an increase in spawns or simply more 3-cost echoes for this set in later versions. And with what we've seen from developer teasers, this might be a bit closer than we think. Overall, Void Thunder is—
I was wondering about that when I saw the image for that. Is what Sonata sets does that echo fall under? I'll be curious. Hey, if it's good if it is Void Thunder, because again, we do need something, and it's a forecast as well. So if it is Void Thunder and it's going to benefit those characters, that's a big W. That is a big W.
There's a Sonata set that has issues. From translation and clarity gaps in its activation conditions to its disappointing array of 4-cost skills.
Maybe we'll see a rework. Maybe a new forecast will come in. This will get reworked. They haven't mentioned it though, so I think I'm just grabbing it. I'm grabbing at straws, really.
There's something deeply unsatisfying about using this set. But as I've been saying and players have been seeing, Kuro is a company that listens to player feedback. All we have to do now is wait. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think that's a good point. You know, I'm sure they know. They've got to know. They seem to be on the ball with everything else. They've got the finger on the pulse with what the community thinks in a lot of stuff. And they're not stupid people who are making this game, of course they're not. So they've got to see it. Maybe it's just taking a lot longer to work on this stuff in the background because we don't want them to rush it out and it be broken and it totally mess the game up entirely, or it just comes out and it's just totally lackluster and it was like a waste of time. So hopefully it is something they're working on. Again, we haven't really heard anything from them that they're vocalized in regards that it's something that they see as an issue. But they've got to, haven't they? They've got to see it as an issue. But yeah, it's an issue. The set, again, Calcharo himself, and the Echo Farming as well. It all just does make for a frustrating part of the game. I wouldn't say unsatisfying, because I find Calcharo really satisfying to use, but I suppose that's less from the actual impact in terms of what you're doing to the enemy's damage numbers, all that sort of stuff, and it's more just from an entertainment point for me, because I just think Calcharo's really fun to use. He just feels really impactful. I like his animations. He's just a cool character. It's kind of like the Chang-Li thing, but Chang-Li's really good at the same time. But like all her animations, the audio, all that sort of stuff, it's super impactful, and it's just like it's got that crunch to it, that satisfying crunch to it, which Calcharo has. And again, it feels like it's a remnant of the old Wuthering Waves potentially, and it's still not been adapted for the way the game kind of works now. I could be totally off base on that, but I know the game has changed a lot since the old CBT tests, story, everything. Of course, Calcharo, from what I heard, was going to be a big part of that. So maybe he's just become, you know, he's just a ghost of the old game now, and it's something that they're not too fussed about. He was just left in as a character to bolster the roster potentially. I don't know. And later on, we're going to see more Void Thunder characters that are really designed how they want the game to work in that specific attribute to the game. And maybe we'll see some changes to the Sonata effect as well, because I think it probably does need it, unless we are going to have characters that work really well with the Sonata effect in that regard. And that's potentially what we're going to see. You know, that might be the way we see it and it works. But I still think it's hyper-focused in the way that it works, because the others are a little bit more broad. The resonance skill, intros, that sort of stuff. All characters have those, and then it doesn't affect the way the rest of the kit is designed, other than that, of course, if you've got more resonance skill, you can get those benefits and bonuses more often. But the fact that it's the stacks, the way they work, it makes it so the characters kind of have to be designed in a more specific way. So I definitely do think it's something that'll be changed. But Kuro are smart. They know what they're doing. I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it'll get updated. And then maybe Calcharo will be a little bit more useful. And maybe his kit will change. Potentially. Let's see. I think we will see some changes. But anyway, great video from Saint Tontas, guys. You should go check him out. Make some awesome content. Electro got screwed over. It really did, to be fair. It really did.